Welcome to the 2024 Latinx Kidlit Book Festival. So happy to see you here, Guadalupe.
Hi,
Please read our anti-harassment policy in the chat box, and we're going to get started now. Guadalupe, you get to start.
yes, it is my pleasure to introduce you to one of the wonderful, wonderful authors we have that are Latinx. David Bowles is a Mexican American author and translator from South Texas, where he teaches literature and the indigenous language Nahuatl at the University of Texas Rio Grande Valley. Among his 40 published books are the multi award winning They Call Me Güero, The Prince and the Coyote, and The Feathered Serpent, Dark Heart of Sky, Myths of Mexico, as well as the series Garza Twins, 13th Street, Tales of the Feathered Serpent, and Clockwork Curandera. With author and friend Guadalupe Garcia McCall, that's me, he has co written the romanticities Secret of the Moon Conch and Hearts of Fire and Snow. His short fiction and essays can be found in venues such as the New York Times, Translation Review, School Library Journal, Apex, Strange Horizons, the Sunday Transport, plus multiple anthologies and textbooks. He is the current president of the Texas Institute of Letters. Welcome, David.
Thank you so much. And it's my pleasure to introduce you to my hermana del alma, Guadalupe Garcia McCall, who is the national best-selling, award-winning author of several young adult novels, including Under the Mesquite, the national bestseller Summer of the Mariposas, translated by yours truly, and Echoes of Grace, with author and dear friend David Bowles. That's me. She's co-written those two novels that you mentioned, and we're planning many more. She's also written short stories for adults and many, many poems for different age groups. For her work, Guadalupe has received the prestigious Pura del Pre Author Award, a Westchester Young Adult Fiction Award, the Tomas Rivera Mexican American Children's Book Award, among many other accolades. Guadalupe is currently affiliate faculty in the MFA of Creative Writing program at Antioch University, LA. Ooh, LA, fancy. She lives in South Texas, though, where she is working on the Seasons of Sisterhood novels, 3 YA books set in the world of Summer of the Mariposas that are coming from 2 books beginning in 2025 all the way through 2027, among many other super secret projects. So happy to be here with you today, Guadalupe.
Thank you.
I guess we need to talk really quickly about what has kind of eased us into writing about history and incorporating it into our lives. And for me, that was growing up in a household of storytellers and hearing from my Uncle Joe Casas, who was like our family historian, all the tales of how our family had made it to Tamaulipas into southern Texas, and hearing like his kind of flashbacks about his childhood and all the stories about people that I knew and their parents and grandparents. And so I grew up with this appreciation that our lives were kind of, they intersected with history. What about you? What kind of like drew you into this?
Well, my puppy is the one that taught me how to write. And he taught me by putting a pencil in my hand when I was 5 years old and saying, the S is a serpiente sitting up on its tail. And then he put a little rattle at the end of the S and a little eyes and a little tongue. And I was hooked. I thought, this is it. This is what I want to do. I want to tell stories with my pencil. I want to make magic with my pencil. But as I got older, I started hearing more of the actual stories that my father told. And he told stories of my grandparents, how my grandfather came into the United States when he was 15 years old, and the places in that all through the United States where he had worked, but also the places his brothers had worked, the places he had worked. So there was a lot of history behind these 3 generations of men who had worked all through the United States. And I just got hooked on hearing about precedents and laws that went into effect, and then how people were treated during that time. So history became like a really, really important thing for me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We've worked on these 2 books that we've talked about. And so maybe really briefly, we can kind of like pitch the way history intersects with the 2 of them. Why don't you tell them about Secret of the Moon Conch and how it plays with history?
Well, Secret of the Moon Conch is about a young woman who comes to the United States. So she's migrating to the United States to look for her father. But before she leaves her little village in Mexico, she finds a conch, a seashell, a giant seashell. And she doesn't know it yet, but it has some kind of magic. And once she's on her own out there in the desert, trying to make the long, long journey, she starts communicating with someone 500 years ago, because 500 years ago, there was a young warrior in Tenochtitlan who was really literally being pursued by the conquistadores, the Spanish, and he threw the moon conch into the ocean and she found it. And because it's a magical moon conch, connected to the religion and in his world, they're able to connect and be able to talk to each other. So she's in the present, but he's 500 years ago. And it's really interesting to try to communicate across time through a conch.
Yeah, so it's a really great tool that we came up with this idea of yours of having minds connected, and so it allows us to have half the story 500 years ago and then half the story in the present, and all of the weird paradoxes that can arise when you have a character who knows what's going to happen.
Exactly.
Not to that specific person, right? So they're really, really fascinating. And then we followed it up this year with our book, Hearts of Fire and Snow, which, although it's entirely set in the present, deals with characters who are essentially reincarnated versions of people in the past from the Toltec era. Either reincarnated or regenerated versions. Kind of complicated, but if you read it, you'll know what we're talking about. And in that book, rather than having like live, participation in the past, we get the past through flashbacks and dreams and stuff like that. So it's also a really fun way of doing that same kind of work of holding the present and the past in juxtaposition so that they say things about each other, just like in Secret of the Moon Conch, the great book that you came up with the idea for. We get to see the similarities between people captured by the Spanish, people captured by ICE in the present, and we get to see the similarities between the rich Mexican Americans of Reno, Nevada, and the aristocracy of the Toltec Empire. So it's like fun to do that sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that I think that's really the point of bringing the past in, is to inform the present. Because I mean, we could write purely historical novels. We both have done that.
Right.
You've done it in a couple of books, Shame the Stars and All the Stars Denied. And I've done it in The Prince and the Coyote, for example. And so we love to write about the past. But there's something really cool about having both together. It's like a Reese's peanut cup. You get your chocolate, you get your peanut butter, and you mix them together.
Yeah.
Or like chile on fruit, tienes lo dulce, lo chiloso, spicy with sweet. It's just that juxtaposition, I think, is special.
Yeah.
So we want to make sure that we're going to move into our topics now. So what do we want to make sure that people who are participating have ready?
Well, we want to make sure that people are ready to write with us. So they need to have some kind of paper or maybe a computer, pens, anything handy that you can write with.
Absolutely. Because we're going to be focusing everything on this essential question that you see on the screen. How do collaborative writers, or you don't have to be a collaborative writer. We're just talking about it from that perspective. How does any writer, frankly, integrate distant history into the timelines of contemporary fantasies? How to make that work? And fantasy is a great vehicle for doing it, because you can have magical means, as Guadalupe was suggesting, for connecting the past and the present. So before we do that, what do we need to make sure that they've got an understanding?
Well, I think one of the things we need to do is we should review the vocabulary, the terms that are important to today's workshop. So why don't you go ahead and start with historical fiction?
Okay, good. So we've got 4 terms. The first one is historical fiction. And this is when we have a fictional plot that takes place in the setting of real historical events. It's kind of tricky, requires a lot of research. And we're not going to talk about the research today, but we are going to talk about ways of deploying this. when you use when you're talking about a particular moment, you've got to pay attention to the manners, the social conditions, and other details of that depicted period, so that it feels real, that it's got that texture. Even to people who are uninitiated, they're going to be expecting certain things from the past, right? Novels of historical fiction often will also contain notable historical figures and events, so that readers can get a better understanding of how the people might have responded to the particular elements of their environments, especially these novel fantasy things that we're inserting. Like, can we be, realistic in the way our characters respond? Why don't you tell us about romantasy? That's the big buzzword now, right?
I know romantasy has become so popular in today's world. So romantasy can is a story that is told using many of the elements, many of the things that you find in a regular romance novel. However, one of the key features in a romantic fantasy involves the focus on relationships, but not just the relationship and the romance. We're talking also about social skills, social settings, everything that makes up that world that you are writing about, the politics of that world, the culture of that world, anything that makes up world building. It's really important. It's not just romance and fantasy, although those are the main components. Some publishers distinguish between a romantic fantasy, in which the fantasy elements are the more important ones, and it has a little bit of, what do you call it, a dash of romance, right? But it's really truly a fantasy. And then there's also
The
the
fantasy.
opposite, the
Yeah.
fantasy romance, in which the romance is the big part and the fantasy is sprinkled in. But in truth, the line between these two is really blurry, and you can really go and meander back and forth between them as whatever makes you happy.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, there will be some people who'll be like, I really prefer more romance than fantasy. And there's all kinds. That's why book reviews exist. So you can find the thing that you like the most. I think that you and I like to try to keep them in balance. We like to
I
have,
do so.
yeah,
Yeah.
like plenty of romance, but also plenty of the fantasy and the historical setting as well.
And we even go as far as putting realism in there.
Yeah, yeah, we're both really big into realism.
Yeah.
Um, there's different ways of integrating these things. So the flashback is a scene that obviously takes place earlier in time than the main story and interrupts the chronological flow of things. And these flashbacks can be like vivid dreams or actual memories or just unexpected visions. Whatever it is, though, it's a way to pull the reader out of the present for a moment and let them see the past. And it's often very startling and unexpected and usually revelatory, like secrets get revealed. When you're doling out history through flashbacks, you're being very careful about what you reveal. And you can have flashbacks where the person's not really sure and their memory's kind of vague. And it's one of the reasons that so many telenovelas have people with amnesia is because
Uh-huh.
it's a way to like slowly reveal the past as they're remembering things, and so it's great.
One of the things we did in this one, in Hearts of Fire and Snow, is we actually had a lot of repetition. So we repeated, like, they had a flashback, we repeated the end part, added a little bit more, and then repeated the last part and ended up, so the repetition kind of showed us, hey, this is all one big puzzle,
Yeah,
and you have to put all these flashbacks together to figure it out. And that's the beauty of flashback.
and one way we do that is through alternating the POVs, right?
Yes. So one of the things that David and I did for both our novels, and it actually worked really well for us, is having two people have their own chapters. So he tells one, so maybe David starts with chapter one, and my character, the female character, has chapter two, and then he has three and four. And when they go back and forth like that, everybody gets to be balanced on stage for their own story, and it never feels like it's one-sided. It always feels like like a romance should be. It's very equal, it's very balanced, and there's a lot of universality in it because it just feels like a whole picture presented by two different characters.
That's right. Okay, so let's dive in. Let's share some samples from our work so they can kind of see what we're talking about.
Sure.
This first example is the prologue from Secret of the Moon Conch, which literally talking about a flashback. It literally starts at the end, and then the entire rest of the book tells the story up to this scene, and then we get like the final chapter or two after it, right?
And you thought about this, and I think it's actually quite brilliant.
Yeah,
So kudos to you.
Thank you so much. So this is narrated from my character's perspective, Calisto, a Mexica teenager who's from Tenochtitlan in 1521. I crest the low bluff, and the vast ocean spreads out before me, jade green and sparkling. I have never seen so much water, though I have dreamed of the ever-flowing skirt of Mother Sea, twining itself around the world, swaddling us in her watery embrace. I would stare like this for hours, but the Spanish are still on my heels, reinforcements converging from the city they established at the mouth of the Huitzilpan River. Gripping the moon conch against my chest, I begin my descent toward the beach, feet slipping clumsily on the tricky sand. I'm a child of the highlands, son of mountains, born to live and die close to our father the sun. But she needs me. She must receive this sacred shell, this tenuous thread of magic that connects her heart to mine across expanses of space and time. Clinging to root and rock, I make my way down. A rod or so from the bottom, I let go and drop to the sand, resting for the briefest moments. Movement catches my eye, and I glance up the strand. 100 Spanish soldiers are rushing at me, some mounted on horseback. At their head stands the priest, his eyes wide as he sees the conch in my hands. There is no time to lose. I cannot fail her. She must find it. Without it, she will despair. Without it, she will have not helped me. Both of us will be lost. Both of us will die. Goddess, give me strength, I cry as I burst into motion, my feet pounding the beach, driving me toward the sea. Their harquebuses spit lead balls into the sand around me. An arrow grazes my stomach, leaving a long and bloody groove. I do not stop. Ignoring enemy fire, I plunge into the foaming waves, the conch held high. Take it, Mother Sea! Take this sacred shell and place it in her hands. And with all my strength, I fling the pink spiral into the swells. Moments later, unexpected hands haul me from the water.
Woo! That is great. Well, I want to remind everyone about the essential question. So, in thinking about this question, how do collaborative writers integrate distant history into the timelines of contemporary fantasies? Can you tell us, David, how your example shows this in action?
Yes, absolutely. So we get, the things that like readers will be basically familiar with. Any teenager in the U.S. will know that the Spanish invaded Mexico and they conquered the people that we now call Aztecs. And so people will be expecting to see conquistadores. They know that horses were not native to the Americas. So all these elements that people know, I line them up and let people kind of get plunged into a moment where you see the indigenous and the European clashing on this beach. So you get the lead balls bouncing around, you get the men on horses, and all you get from the teen boy is just his physical ability to kind of evade capture, but also his spiritual connection to his gods. He's crying out to his gods and doing all he can. And you see him, in a situation that is a conflict between two cultures. And even though people don't necessarily know, at the head of the prologue is actually the date, so people will know what the date is. But this is taking a historical conflict between these two sides and some actual historical stuff, like the 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 place that he's talking about, the town that they've established at the mouth of Huitzilpan River, is what's called Veracruz, La Villa Rica de la Veracruz, the rich town of the True Cross, which will eventually become the city of Veracruz. And so there are all these things here, but most of this is fiction, right? The priest, we don't know his name, but he's an actual priest. But there was never a time when the priest was on a beach with a guy chasing him. That all that stuff was fictionalized. But like the situation, as you suggested before, includes realism, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So I mean, that is an excellent point, that this all includes realism. And we have to be able to literally step into the shoes of the characters and say, what would they be thinking, right? So, what do we do if we don't have enough information to write about what the people in history felt at the time the historical events occurred?
Yeah, I
When is
mean,
it okay to fictionalize history?
yeah, that's a really great question. And one of the reasons that we use fictional characters, or we fictionalize like legendary characters, you and I, when we're writing, is so that we can have a little bit of poetic license, a little bit of creative control. But ultimately, two things occur to me. One is you do your research really well and find out, to the best of our ability to know, what is it that a teenager of the age of Callisto, who grew up
Right.
in Tenochtitlan, what would he be like? What kind of schooling would he have had? What would he have been taught? And we have a great resource called the Florentine Codex, 13 volumes that were put together in the 1500s, written in Nahuatl and translated into Spanish and English by now, that I can read in the original language, lucky for me, that like detail what society was like. And so when I'm writing this character, I can come from a very informed perspective, but I do have to invent things. And so the other element is human nature. We are human beings. I was a teenage boy at one time. I was not ever a Mexica teenager in the 1500s, but there are things that are universally human about the experience of adolescence. And
Yeah.
so you can draw on those things. It's one of the reasons that literature is so transcendent, because, how can we read the Odyssey, for example, and identify with Odysseus' struggle? Well, because he's a human being
Right.
with the same, kinds of needs and wants and desires as any human being at any time in history. And that's what literature does. It takes the specifics in order to talk about the universally human. So,
Yeah.
that's one of the really cool things about it. Your research only takes you up to a certain point, and then your instincts as a human being have to kick in, and like
Right.
how do human beings respond to these kinds of situations, right? Okay, so now we're going to do a little bit of practice for about 3 minutes. You can see here that Callisto needs to leave Tenochtitlan before the fall of that city, so that he can get the conch to the beach, so to the water, so that in the future, Citlali, the girl that Guadalupe writes about, can get it. So, what would be the best way to convey the basics of that city's destiny? Like, we readers in the present day know that Tenochtitlan is going to fall, but if you were writing it and Callisto is going to leave the city before it falls, but Callisto needs to know at some point that his city is going to fall. So how are we going to, or maybe the reader, if the reader doesn't know, how are we going to convey to the readers the fact that Tenochtitlan falls? So couple options here. Have the protagonist come back to the city and see it fall. That's an option. Show the events in a flashback. Take somebody who from after the fall and have them look back at it. Or have the other protagonist, Citlali, who's in the future, reveal the outcome of the siege. So take a moment and just down on your paper, jot down the pros and cons of each one of those approaches. Okay, take about 3 minutes to do that, and we'll circle back around. Okay, about 30 seconds. Start wrapping up what you're doing. Okay. I'm sure that you came up with some really, really interesting pros and cons for each of those. And so, spoiler alert, we're going to reveal what we actually did in the story. Okay. Guadalupe, why don't you tell them what we actually did?
Sure. So what happened was that Citlali was so worried about him that she actually reveals to him that his city is going to fall and he should not go back there. And in a way, she saves his life because she had that information that was so important to him at that time. It
Yeah.
breaks his heart. And of course, he has to not only deal with that, but there are other revelations that she gives him along the way that are also very helpful to him, but heartbreaking.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's like one of those things where we all wish that we could see the future sometimes, but be careful of getting your wish because sometimes that future can be devastating. But there is, hope because she, after all, is a Nahua. She grew up in Zoncolica and Veracruz and is descendant of people who were subjects of the empire. And so there's something of that culture that survives. And then among regular Mexicans, the worship of at least one of the goddesses in this syncretic form as the Virgin Mary, the Virgen de Guadalupe, still.
Yeah, that's actually a beautiful moment when he gets to see the goddess that is still exists in our time and is still beloved.
Yeah,
And it's a very, very heartwarming moment for him.
absolutely. So we're going to shift now to Hearts of Fire and Snow, and Guadalupe is going to share something with you.
Well, this example that I brought today is from chapter 26 when Blanca is having very intense visions, which are actually flashbacks to her past life as Princess Istak. Only she doesn't know that yet.
Yeah.
So here we go. She is the key. She is the kingdom. The words bounce off the recesses of my mind, reverberating inside me, amplified by the blood rushing to my head, beating against my eardrum, and I close my eyes. She is the key, the key, the key. Without her, I have no power. As they spin and swirl in my head, the words trigger a memory, and I have a vision, a shadowy figure, a broad shouldered man dressed in ancient garb, dark robes with glinting metal ornamentation from a place and culture I do not recognize. Instantly, I know this happened in an ancient world, way before my time. How or why I am there, listening in the darkness, I don't quite understand. But I stand frozen in place, trying to comprehend, to recollect, to grasp the wisp of what is rising like a nightmare out of the darkness of my mind. I feel faint, and I reach up and grab onto the vines of hardy rose bushes clinging to the tall trellis for support. She is the kingdom, the kingdom, the kingdom. Without her, I have no power. The words are the same, but the voice is different, deeper, darker, more sadistic. The shadowy figure is standing with his co conspirators, dark, skulking figures who look at the ground and nod. I want to step forward and come out of the darkness, but I have to be quiet. I have to find out what he is plotting. Suddenly, as quickly as it came, the vision dissipates. I open my eyes and I am back in my time. Only I am not gripping the rose vines in front of me anymore. I am eavesdropping on my padrino. I am alone in the garden maze, looking down at my numb hands, alarmed by the coldness of the frozen news I am holding before me. Horrified, I scream and drop the loop of ice. It shatters on the brick walkway like an ancient crystal artifact, sending 1,000 shards of ice flying around my feet. I step back from that malevolence and turn and run. As if in slow motion, I run through the maze, twisting this way and that, my breath leaving my lips in tiny puffs of air that crystallize as I rush, rush, rush until I break through the thicket and stop there at what feels like the edge of time. I stand still, arms outstretched, balancing myself so as not to fall into the deep end of the pool in our very own backyard. As I titter there, on the brink of tumbling over and plunging into that resplendent pool, another vision comes into my subconscious. A dark image wavers and unravels, becoming more and more tangible until it is superimposed on my sight, and I realize I am on the verge of plummeting into the rolling river, where a fearsome jaguar awaits my fall.
So, I mean, that's a really, really intense flashback that's unexpected for her. This is at a point where Bianca does not, where Blanca does not call her Bianca, where Blanca does not remember her identity from her previous life yet, and she's getting flashes of it. And so, when you're doing that kind of thing, this like what we were talking about before, this careful reveal, um, in order to incorporate history, how do you make the choice of what to show and what not to show without confusing the reader? Because you like want the reader to understand the basics of what are happening without necessarily knowing the time or who the individuals are. So like how do you handle that kind of weird juggling act to talk
I
about the
think
past without telling what it is that you're talking about?
Right. So keeping the details of who these people are really important. So instead of saying it's this person that I saw, it's a shadowy figure, right?
Yeah.
So bringing in the images and the imagery, what did it feel like? What was the weather like? How did the weather shift in that moment from where she was on a perfectly normal day in her garden, and now she's in this other place that is very dark, seeing these shadowy figures, and they look like conspirators, which to her is nothing she's ever seen before. And so just shifting back and forth, and I don't know if the readers can see this, but I use italics to show what is happening in the vision and regular text to show what is happening in her present. And the italics and the because I mix it up so much, it kind of gives the reader that signal, hey, this is part of the vision, it's not part of the present. And so that's really important, I think, using
Yeah, and
signals. Yeah.
absolutely. There are all kinds of little signals about it, like the whole the jaguar. Like you use all these terms, like, talking about the jaguar, talking about a culture, and you mentioned like the clothing being something that you don't recognize. All those like little hints are
Right, in ancient world, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
So, and for the reader at this point, because this is chapter 26, right? So at chapter 26, everybody knows that my character is definitely like this Toltec warrior who is looking for his lost love. And so the reader is gonna is putting the pieces of the puzzle together and probably understands that she's having a vision of that time period that we've seen him have flashbacks about. So
And
yeah,
which brings in a little bit of dramatic irony, right?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, the where the reader knows a little bit more than the characters know. Yeah.
yeah. Which is always fun. Dramatic irony is like my favorite. I was just talking to my students at the university today about the line um, where Juliet and Romeo and Juliet says something like, I'm not gonna quote it exactly, but her basic line is, "Oh my gosh, who is that guy? Tell me that he's not married, or else my wedding bed is like to be my grave or something like that. We're basically saying, please tell me that he's single because otherwise I'm going to kill myself. And it's just like this irony, because it's dramatic irony, because the audience is like, girl, maybe you shouldn't be saying stuff like that. Just saying, just maybe.
Yeah.
Te vas a salar, you're going to bring unluck to yourself.
Right.
So why don't you go ahead and share the exercise the next exercise we're going to do with the students.
Sure. So here's the practice. Given that Blanca has no idea why she is having these visions, what would be the best way to help her see that her visions are actually flashbacks of a previous life? How can we as writers help her see that, come to that realization and that understanding about herself? Would it be best to have her research some historical kingdoms and keys and try to find out, some of the things that the conspirators were talking about? She could try to pull that in research. Or would it be better to have her interrogate her padrino, the person that lives with her, her guardian, about her family history, or maybe the home they live in, because she did go into the garden and have this vision, and that's mainly in this house that she's been having these visions. So it would be a good idea to interrogate him and find out what happened here. Where did all this come from? Or maybe the third way is have her watch some YouTube videos on visions of the past and do some research like that, see what she can find. So we'd love it if you could pick a technique and explain how this might be the best way to help Blanca understand what she is experiencing in these moments. We're going to give you 3 minutes and the timer starts now.
Okay, be wrapping up. We got just about 20 seconds left. Okay, so um, in our there are all these really great options that you could have done. So many ways that you could take it, um, but in this particular case of this book, Blanca is aided in her understanding that these are actual flashbacks. Maybe I don't know if aided is the right term by Greg. Greg is the um, the modern version of this Toltec warrior that she was once in love with in another life, kind of pushing her into connecting to who she was in the past through like forcing her to protect herself using magic. Their souls are bound to volcanoes, his to an active volcano, hers to a dormant volcano, and he knows from things that she's done already that she can protect herself using ice. And so he tries to trigger her memories by, and I mean, dudes do stupid things. Okay, if it's just the way it is, attacking her with fire so that she'll respond to ice and awaken to her memories. It doesn't go the way he planned. Spoiler alert.
Nothing ever does.
Nothing ever does. He thinks it's a really good idea. There's lots of people around him telling him, "Bro, no, don't, no. What are you doing?" But he insists on it, and it doesn't go well. She does how I mean, it doesn't go well, but it does help her to remember. It does help her. His confrontation, his telling her who she is, does clarify her vision somewhat, and then later on, she has her memories restored to her through this like ritual. We won't go into too much detail, but she does get her memories back. So she does some research on her own. She is prodding her padrino and trying to find stuff out, and like why is he associated with this memory, but she does find out on her own.
Yeah.
So you can see there's lots of different options, and a writer has to choose from among those things when you're trying to reveal the past. So just remember some of these important look fors that we were talking about. We want to make sure that when you come away from this, that you understand about the difference between historical fiction and romantasy, but how they kind of overlap, and the fact that when you have those dual points of view, you can give a really balanced view of both the present and the past that you're trying to incorporate by having one character be rooted in the present and one character rooted in the past. And it just so happens that in the two books we've written, I've uh, been the character who's more rooted in the past, right? This is fun for me because it's kind of stuff I love. But there was another term, right?
Yes, there was flashback. And if we could just remember that when we're using flashback, we should really use it sparingly. It shouldn't be huge, like entire chapters where there's flashbacks. You want to use them appropriately in a way that gets the most value out of them. And that's really the critical piece there. How much can you bring in? How little can you bring in and get the most value? And building on every flashback so that flashbacks are serving a purpose, like I said earlier, like a piece of a puzzle that you put together later. Unless you want to do just straight out historical writing, which is totally different.
Absolutely. Okay, and so for them to practice, what do we have lined up for them?
Ah, yes. This is what we've decided that would be a great prompt for you. Think of a historical moment and write a scene where a fictional character of your devising is having a memory or a flashback to the events of that time. Make sure you use transitional phrases to show the character entering and exiting the flashback.
And teachers, this is a really great time to remind you that um, you can pause this recording and give your students more time so that they can really explore this and come up with a character in a moment of time and try to write a quick little paragraph in which the character flashes back. But right now, and at this moment, we'll take about 2 minutes to give you some time. Okay, about 30 more seconds, and then we'll be fielding a couple of questions. Okay, perfect. We hope that that exercise gave you a little bit of a taste of the kind of work that Guadalupe and I enjoy doing so much. It's just nothing quite like trying to find ways to bridge the past and the present in books, and we really appreciate that. I think we have some time to entertain a couple of questions. So what do we have? All right. So somebody from White Elementary in Tucson, Arizona asks, "Who did you write this book for?" Guadalupe, you want to feel that? Who do we write these books for? What do you think?
I think we write these books for young people because we want them to see themselves in our literature, but we also want them to know who they are, where they came from, and what we have that we've brought with us from the past
Yeah,
into the present.
exactly. So I mean, we are, I personally think about like Mexican American kids, teens, as being like like if like I'm a storyteller and there's a campfire and they're the kids who are sitting right at the edge of the fire, and then behind them are other kids who are interested in these stories and like will be edified by hearing them as well and learn something of our rich heritage and be entertained and really dig in as well. And beyond them, the adults who are also going to be fascinated by these stories. But almost always, the faces that I see being lit up by the fire, those are, my own children, students that I teach. You know how it is. We've been teachers for so long,
Right.
that we're almost always thinking about them.
And we have a beautiful culture with beautiful stories, and we want them to be brought back into the limelight and become part of the national conversations we're having in classrooms.
Right, and a lot of classrooms don't really tap into the history of Mexico. A lot of kids in the U.S., even in places that are primarily Mexican American, don't know much about that heritage
Right.
of Mexico and New Spain and pre-Spanish invasion Mesoamerica and so forth. And if we can bring those stories into the pages of books in fun and interesting and compelling ways, then we've done our work, right?
Yeah.
It's a blessing to be able to do
Right.
that stuff.
Yes.
Do we have another question? Ooh, how do we come up with the titles of the book?
Wow. Well, when I first came up with the story for Moon Conch, I just knew about the two characters. I knew that one was in the present and one was in the past. And if you remember, David, when I first approached you about writing this novel, I said I don't know how they're going to communicate, but it's a lot like that movie, I
The
think it
lake.
was the Lake House, where they communicate, one in the present and one in the past, but they do it through a mailbox, sending letters to each other. And I said, so I don't know how it's going to do, how that's going to happen. And then you came up with this brilliant idea of the moon conch. You want to talk about that, and then we can talk because that's really where the title comes from.
Exactly. So, and I had just seen an article about the discovery on a beach of this ceremonial trumpet. It was made out of a conch, and it was all covered with runes, decorations. And I was like, oh snap! Imagine if she finds it in the present, and he's got it in the past, and sounding the trumpet, this sacred trumpet, connects them across time. And the anthropologists were saying that it was probably used in worship of the moon goddess Koyushawaki. And I was like, that's perfect. His mom could be a priestess of the moon goddess, and then their connection can be kind of controlled by the phases of the moon. And like once we figured it out, that was it. And for the longest time, it was just called the moon conch, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But then I think our editor was the one that said, it's almost like the conch has a secret. So wouldn't it be cool to call it Secret of the Moon Conch? And we were like, yes, that sounds perfect.
And then we were able to incorporate that in and like create the actual like song, the ritual song that talks about the secret of the moon conch. And like the last line is that to I will reveal to the staunch the secret of the moon conch. It's just, I get goosebumps just thinking about it. It's so cool.
I know, it was so great. The way it was very organic, the way that happened.
Yeah. So we just want to let you guys know that history is an important element in all of our lives, no matter what your identity is. And so finding books that are anchored in history and that flash back to them is just really great and something fun for you to do as well. Please know that you can find us online. We have websites. Mine is davidbowles.us and yours is
ggmccall.com.
And you can find us on social media all over the place. You usually are at GG McCall. I'm usually at David O. Bowles. But if you just like search for us, you can find us, follow us, chat with us, shoot us emails, whatever you want. Thank you so much for listening to this session. For more craft resources, check out the rest of the craft panels at this year's festivals, as well as the mini craft lessons on the educator page of the festival website. Thank you for watching. Muchas gracias. Tlazocamati.
Have a blessed day.